Last time, we explored the anxious-sounding minor 7 flat 5 chord, also known as half diminished 7, which is spelled root minor 3rd, diminished 5th, minor 7th, or more colloquially among working musicians, 1 flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. Today, I'd like to show you minor 7 flat 5's harmonic next of kin, so to speak, fully diminished 7th chord, which is spelled, for all intents and purposes, root flat 3, flat 5, 6. It's actually double flat 7, but forget that. It's major 6. Classical composers have used this chord for centuries because it has a very spooky, unresolved quality that begs to resolve to a more stable sounding major or minor chord, and is a very effective device for creating that nice harmonic tension and release, or that ebb and flow, that push and pull. And songwriters in the early to mid 20th century, popular songwriters at the time, used it all the time in what are now considered jazz standards, blues standards in the early 20th century. And what I'd like to do today is focus on the modern era, how guitar-driven contemporary artists have used the diminished 7th chord as an effective tool for songwriting. Friends in Low Places, famously sung by Garth Brooks, is a great well-known example of a song that uses a diminished 7th chord as a connecting chord between the 1 major and the 2 minor, minor 7. Let's check it out. So the main acoustic guitar part that begins the song is played with a capo at the 2nd fret. It's played as if it were in the key of G, but because of the capo, it sounds in the concert key of A. And the voicings are essentially just your open G cowboy chord. You could either include this note, the low 3rd, or leave it out. Depends on how much gain you have. I mean, if you're playing acoustic, you probably want to include that. And then G diminished 7th. Now I'm definitely muting the A string. I'm playing the 4th fret relative to the capo, that is. 4, and then nothing on the A string. And then 3, 4, 3, 4. That's G sharp diminished 7th. And then A minor 7, kind of like the Stairway to Heaven voicing, but with the capo at the 2nd fret. And then D. And it's arpeggiated because, arpeggiation always makes something sound more interesting rather than just strumming the chords like blah, blah, right? So if you go, you do that little sus2 to the major thing. So you have the 1 chord, and then sharp 1 diminished or flat 2 diminished 7, going to the 2 minor 7, and then that's a 2-5 to D. And then the verse comes in back on G. Now you could also play that without the capo. I want to show you a couple other ways to play that. It's a very useful, common progression. You play A like this, or you do the folk A, where you get the high E string in there, and then A sharp diminished 7th. That's a nice voicing, right? Because you have 2 open strings and it rings nicely. Then B minor 7, like that, and then a nice big E chord. So you got And yet another way would be to play capo 7. As you can see, I like using the capo because it affords you the opportunity to use all these nice voicings and do it in a very easy way that allows you to do little embellishments as well. So there's D. It actually kind of sounds like Here Comes the Sun, right? And then you got D sharp diminished 7th. Okay, so we're going from the 1 chord. This is actually a concert A, and then A sharp diminished 7th. And then you could play, but it's written as D sharp diminished 7th because you're always thinking of it in terms of the capo. And then E minor 7, which is actually B minor 7, and then A chord, which is actually E. So it's nice and high and chimey, right? And normally that would be a big stretch down here if you weren't using the capo, but the capo gives you the opportunity to make these stretches much more comfortably. And you could, if your guitar allows, capo 9 is probably as high as you could go in an acoustic because of the, the horn, the neck. But like an SG here, I can go pretty high with the capo. Capo 9, you could play C, and then you could do this. C sharp diminished 7th. Now here I'm doing what I did earlier. I'm actually muting the string above the bass note. So this way, if I strum across it, you just hear like a silent pitchless percussive chook, which gets buried in the chord. And then you got your D minor 7 like that, and then G. So here it's 1, sharp 1 diminished 7, to 2 minor 7, to 5. And finally, sometimes you don't have a capo or you don't feel like using a capo. So it's good to have some movable shapes that you can just shift up and down. So bar chords are great for that. So here's the same way to play this same progression. Here's A, right? Standard type 1 bar chord, and then A sharp diminished 7. That's actually the same grip we used when I showed you initially with the capo 2. And then you can play B minor 7 like this, and then E7 like this, which is a nice voicing. That's like a C7 shape. It's like the Credence, right? A lot of songs use that. Saw Her Standing There. I like that one. The chorus to Adia by Sarah McLachlan from the 90s, big hit song, pop song, features the use of a diminished 7th chord in the chorus, specifically starting at 111 the first time, where she says, Adia, we are still in ascent. And then a few bars later, I think around 124. So it's kind of like this. She's playing capo 3, all right, and basically just playing a C chord, and then B flat diminished 7th, and then D minor over F. Well, that's pretty. Remember, we spoke recently about first inversion minor chords, putting the minor 3rd in the bass. It has that sadly dark sound. And then it goes to the G, the 5, E minor, which is the 3 chord, and then here's that diminished 7th. It's easy, we all falter, does it matter? So again, it's 2, 3, 4. That's nice. E takes you back to A minor. The song actually sounds in the key of C minor because of the capo. So it's E flat major and its relative minor key C minor due to the capo transposition. Probably the most celebrated example of a diminished 7th chord's use in recent history and popular music is My Sweet Lord by George Harrison. The former Beatle, at around 26 seconds, I believe, into the track, uses a capo at the 2nd fret. Well, he uses it for the whole thing, but at 26 seconds, he plays a D chord and then F sharp diminished 7th. Wow, that's a thick voicing, all 6 strings. Notice how unstable and unsettling it feels, like you want to move on from that. Which he does. Then he goes to B7 just by removing that finger. So it goes. And then that's the main vamp of the song. It's kind of a 2-5 in the key of D, E minor. All right, so that. An interesting thing about the diminished 7th chord is that due to its symmetrical interval structure, which is stacked minor thirds, for example, we're going to go. Those are all 3 fret increments apart. That's a diminished 7 arpeggio. It's interchangeable. So you could play, move it up 3 frets, and it's actually the very same chord. And Harrison demonstrates this beautifully in My Sweet Lord with a slide guitar melody he plays over that part twice, and then there's that F sharp diminished 7th chord, and then B7, E minor to A. I don't have a slide with me, but it's basically the melody. There's the 3 fret increments. So you have that minor thirds. Paul McCartney also made great use of this interchangeable inversions thing with the diminished seventh chord in the Beatles' classic Michelle, specifically first at around 14 seconds and 17 seconds. I'm playing with a capo here, which is, I believe, the way Paul played it. Michelle, my belle. Interesting chord. 7 sharp 9. If you listen closely, that's the chord. It's actually the vocal harmonies are creating that chord. And then B flat 6. Now here's your diminished 7. Now there's probably not a guitar actually doing that, but the whole band with the rhythm section as a whole, you get those symmetrical inversions. So again, it's and then I'm playing A diminished 7th, which you can think of it as F sharp diminished 7th, A diminished 7th, C diminished 7th. That resolves to G, and then beautiful. The intro to Plush by Stone Temple Pilots features a very cool and different kind of use of a diminished chord. In this case, it's just a diminished triad, which is the first 3 notes. The root, the minor third, and the diminished 5th, which root flat 3, flat 5. And guitarist Dean DeLeo plays a simple G5 chord, not even that, he's just playing the top 3 strings. And then he plays G diminished, A minor 7. Meanwhile, bassist brother Rob DeLeo is playing. You have an interesting contrary motion there. Combine them. That's a very satisfying and very familiar sound. You know, we've all heard that before in the blues turnarounds, you know, Robert Johnson. Right? Another great example was Come and Go Blues by the Allman Brothers, brothers and sisters. That's like that standard blues turnaround, right? You have, you could look at this as G7, but you could look at it as B diminished with the root on top over G, B flat diminished over G, and then A diminished over G, resolving finally to G, and very satisfyingly. With the whole band, you get like a cool kind of groove like this. I believe Greg Allman originally wrote that on acoustic guitar in open G tuning, finger picking. Now I'm in standard tuning, but he did something along the lines of, so this is G7, no 3, and then there's your E diminished, which is related to B flat diminished. It's the same effect, you know, that's a hauntingly beautiful sound, right? And then this one. Another great example that immediately comes to mind is Bob Dylan's Rainy Day Women, number 13 and 35. He has a bunch of trombones and horns in the band, and they're doing something like, it's the exact same move in the key of F. We were doing this a minute ago, which is like your standard blues turnaround, but there's another great use for diminished chords.